This first story was submitted by a guy named Julian, who worked as a late-night delivery driver in a sleepy, affluent suburb just outside of Portland, Oregon. The thing about delivering food at 3 in the morning is that the world feels fundamentally different than it does during the day. The bustling suburban streets, usually filled with minivans and joggers, turn into these cold, silent corridors of asphalt and shadow. You start to notice things you'd normally overlook. The way a single flickering street lamp casts long, distorted shapes across a driveway, or how the sound of your own tires on the pavement seems unnaturally loud when the rest of the world is asleep. I'd been doing this for about 6 months to help pay for my final year of college, and for the most part it was easy money. Most of my customers were either exhausted nurses coming off a double shift, or college kids with the munchies who were too tired to be anything but polite. But then came a Tuesday night in mid-November. The air was thick with that heavy, bone-chilling Pacific Northwest mist that isn't quite rain but manages to soak through your clothes anyway. Around 2:45 a.m., I picked up a single order from a 24-hour diner, just a double cheeseburger and a large fry. The drop-off location was out on the edge of town, where the manicured lawns of the suburbs start to give way to the dense, towering Douglas firs of the foothills. It was a wealthy area, full of those massive McMansions that sit on 2-acre lots, separated by thick lines of trees. As I pulled into the neighborhood, I noticed how dark it was. In these types of communities, people value their privacy, which usually means no streetlights and long winding driveways. I checked my GPS, which told me I was approaching the house, but when I pulled up to the curb, the place was pitch black. No porch light, no flickering blue glow of a TV through the windows, nothing. It looked like a hollow shell of a house. I double-checked the address in the app. It matched perfectly. I'm not a naturally jumpy person, but something about the silence of that cul-de-sac felt heavy. I stepped out of my car, the cold mist hitting my face, and grabbed the bag of food. My footsteps on the gravel driveway sounded like gunshots in the quiet. I walked up to the front door, which was tucked behind a large stone pillar, and set the food down as the app instructed. Leave at door. I took the required photo, the flash of my phone camera momentarily blinding me. As my eyes adjusted back to the darkness, I turned to walk back to my car. That's when I saw him. About 50 yards away, standing perfectly still at the edge of the neighbor's property line, was a man. He wasn't in a driveway or on a sidewalk. He was standing directly in the middle of a cluster of trees, half shrouded by the fog. He was tall, wearing a dark, oversized hoodie and light-colored jeans that stood out against the black bark of the firs. He wasn't moving. He wasn't looking at a phone. He was just positioned there, facing me. My heart did a slow, heavy thud in my chest. I tried to tell myself it was just a neighbor taking their dog out, but there was no dog, and nobody stands that still in the freezing mist at 3 a.m. I didn't say a word. I didn't ask, "Can I help you?" I just quickened my pace, got into my car, and locked the doors immediately. The click of the locks felt like the only thing keeping me safe. I started the engine, threw it into reverse, and backed out of the driveway. As I swung my car around, my headlights swept across the trees where the man had been standing. He was gone. I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. Just a weirdo, I muttered to myself, trying to shake the feeling of those unseen eyes. I drove out of the cul-de-sac and began the 5-minute trek back toward the main road. The route back was a series of long, winding residential streets with high hedges on either side. About a minute into the drive, I glanced at my rearview mirror. 2 dim, yellowish headlights appeared from a side street behind me. At first, I didn't think much of it. It's a public road after all. But then I made a left turn onto a road that led deeper into the residential maze. A turn I didn't actually need to make, just to see what would happen. The headlights followed. I made a quick right, then another left. The car stayed exactly 3 car lengths behind me, mimicking my every move. They weren't speeding up to pass. They were pacing me. My hands started to sweat against the steering wheel. I decided to test it one more time. I pulled into a random driveway, killed my lights, and waited. My heart was hammering against my ribs so hard it hurt. I watched the road through my side mirror. A few seconds later, an old, beat-up sedan, maybe an early 2000s, Buick slowly crawled past the driveway. It was moving at maybe 5 miles per hour. The windows were tinted, so I couldn't see the driver, but as it passed under the one lone streetlight on the block, I saw the passenger side window was rolled down halfway. I waited until their taillights disappeared around the next bend before I backed out and floored it in the opposite direction. I knew these roads well, and I figured I could beat them to the main highway if I took a shortcut through a narrow back alley access road used by utility trucks. I killed my lights for a second as I ducked into the access road, feeling like I was in some twisted version of a spy movie, except the stakes felt terrifyingly real. I reached the highway and didn't stop until I pulled into a 24-hour gas station surrounded by bright LED lights and security cameras. I sat there for 20 minutes, staring at the entrance to the parking lot, waiting to see that beat-up Buick. It never showed. I called my supervisor and told them I was done for the night, citing a mechanical issue. I didn't want to explain that I felt like I was being hunted. The next morning, I looked at the delivery app to see if the customer had left a rating. The order had been marked as not received. I looked at the photo I'd taken. In the very corner of the frame, hidden in the deep shadows near the stone pillar where I'd left the food, you could see the tip of a muddy work boot. Someone had been standing right there, just inches away from me, hidden by the pillar while I was dropping off the bag. I quit the job that week. I still wonder if the person in the trees and the person behind the pillar were the same, or if I'd walked right into the middle of something much worse. This second story comes from a woman named Sarah, who delivered for a pizza chain in a rural part of Pennsylvania. I've always lived in the country, so I'm used to the isolation. I'm used to the way the woods look at night, and I'm used to the fact that your nearest neighbor might be a mile away. But there's a difference between country quiet and wrong quiet. It was a Friday night, right around 1:15 a.m. The store was about to close, but one last order slipped through the system. It was for a large pepperoni pizza and 2 liters of soda, going to an address about 12 miles out. My manager groaned, but told me to take it so we could get the extra tip. The drive took me deep into the backwoods, down roads that weren't even paved, just packed dirt and gravel that kicked up dust clouds in my wake. The GPS eventually led me to a long, narrow driveway, blocked by a rusted iron gate. There was a sign hanging from the gate, hand-painted in crude white letters: "No trespassing. Private property. We don't call 911. Standard tough guy rural decor, I thought, but it still made my skin crawl. The gate was closed, but not locked. I had to get out of my car to manually swing it open. As soon as I stepped out, the silence of the woods hit me. There were no crickets, no wind in the trees, just that dead, heavy silence. I pushed the gate open, the metal hinges screaming with a dry, piercing sound that seemed to echo for miles. I drove up the long driveway, my headlights cutting through the darkness until they landed on a small, dilapidated cabin. It looked like it hadn't seen a coat of paint since the 70s. The porch was sagging, and several of the windows were boarded up with plywood. Only one window, near the front door, had a dim, flickering orange light coming from inside, like a single candle or a low-wattage bulb. I grabbed the pizza and the sodas, feeling a massive sense of unease. I walked up the porch steps, which groaned under my weight. I knocked on the door. No answer. I knocked again, louder this time. "Pizza delivery!" I called out. My voice sounded thin and fragile in the open air. Still no answer. But then, I heard something. It wasn't coming from inside the cabin. It was coming from the woods behind me. It was the sound of a heavy branch snapping, followed by the distinct thud of something heavy hitting the ground. I spun around, my flashlight beam darting across the tree line. The light caught a pair of eyes. Not animal eyes, they were too high up. And they didn't have that reflective eye shine you see from deer or raccoons. They were just eyes, staring back at me from behind a thick oak tree, about 20 yards away. "Hello?" I yelled, my voice shaking now. The figure stepped out from behind the tree. It was a man, tall and lanky, wearing a tattered flannel shirt, but it was what he was holding that made my blood turn to ice. In his right hand, he was dragging a long, heavy chain. The links clinked against the rocks as he began to walk toward me, not running, just a slow, deliberate pace. I didn't wait for him to get closer. I dropped the pizza and the sodas right there on the porch and bolted for my car. I could hear him pick up the pace, the sound of the chain rattling faster and faster against the gravel. I dived into the driver's seat, fumbling with my keys as my vision blurred with panic. I shoved the key into the ignition, the engine roared to life, and I slammed it into reverse. As I backed down the driveway, my headlights swept across the porch. The man was standing there now, but he wasn't looking at the pizza. He was staring directly at me, the chain wrapped tightly around his fist. And the worst part? The front door of the cabin, the one I'd been knocking on, was now wide open. Standing in the doorway was a second person, a woman in a stained nightgown, holding a large kitchen knife, just watching me drive away. I didn't stop driving until I reached a well-lit gas station about 15 miles away. My hands were shaking so violently I could barely put the car in park. I sat there in the fluorescent glow of the Sunoco sign, chest heaving. The image of those two people burned into my retinas, the man with the chain and the woman with the knife. It wasn't just a wrong house situation. That cabin was a trap. I called the police from the parking lot, my voice cracking as I explained the location. The dispatcher stayed on the line with me, her calm voice, a sharp contrast to the static of my own mind. The police called me back 2 days later. They'd gone out to the coordinates I provided. The cabin was empty, but it wasn't abandoned. They found the pizza I dropped. The box had been torn open, but the food hadn't been eaten. It was smeared across the porch in a way that looked intentional, like a message. Inside the house, they found several sets of handcuffs bolted to the floorboards in the back bedroom and a collection of cell phones that didn't belong to the owners of the property. The owners, an elderly couple from out of state, had no idea anyone was using the place. The people I saw were squatters, or worse, predators, who used food delivery apps to lure people to remote locations. I quit that night. I still can't look at a gravel driveway without feeling a cold knot of dread tighten in my stomach. This next story comes from a guy named Julian, who used to deliver for one of the big apps in a sprawling suburban area of North Carolina. I'd been driving for about 6 months, and I usually liked the late shift because the roads were empty and the tips were decent. Around 2:15 a.m., I picked up a large order from a 24-hour diner, 3 burgers, 2 shakes, and a mountain of fries. The drop-off was in a neighborhood I knew reasonably well, a maze of cookie-cutter cul-de-sacs and identical-looking 2-story homes. When I pulled onto the street, I noticed it was unusually dark. A lot of the streetlights were out, which wasn't normal for this part of town. I found the house, a dark gray Craftsman, and pulled into the driveway. As I was grabbing the bags from the passenger seat, I saw a pair of headlights turn onto the street behind me. I didn't think much of it. It's a public road after all, but instead of driving past, the car slowed down to a crawl. It stopped directly behind my car, blocking me into the driveway. I froze for a second, the heavy bags of food in my hands. The car was an old, beat-up sedan with one headlight dimmed and a cracked windshield. I couldn't see the driver through the glare of the one working light. I figured it might be a neighbor or maybe the person who ordered the food, so I got out and started walking toward the porch. I kept my eyes on the sedan. The driver didn't get out. They just sat there, the engine idling with a low, rhythmic knocking sound. I reached the porch and rang the bell. No answer. I knocked. Still nothing. I checked my phone to make sure I had the right address. Everything matched. I sent a text to the customer. "I'm outside with your order." As I was typing, I heard the car door of the sedan behind me creak open. I looked back. A tall man in a heavy work jacket and a baseball cap was stepping out. He didn't say a word. He didn't look like he was coming to get his food. He was just standing by his door, watching me. I felt that prickle on the back of my neck. "Is this for you?" I called out, trying to sound more confident than I felt. He didn't answer. He just started walking toward the driveway. Not toward the porch, but toward my car. He reached into his pocket and pulled something out. In the dim light, it looked like a Slim Jim the tool people use to break into car doors. "Hey!" I yelled. "What are you doing?" The man didn't even flinch. He reached my driver's side door and started fiddling with the lock. I realized then that I'd left my car running. In my haste to get the delivery done, I'd left the keys in the ignition and the door unlocked. He wasn't trying to break in. He was trying to take the car. Or worse, he wanted to be inside it when I got back. I dropped the food. Milkshakes exploded across the porch and bolted toward the car. As soon as he saw me charging, he didn't run away. He squared his shoulders and waited for me. He pulled a small, heavy object from his other pocket, a blackjack. I stopped dead in my tracks about 10 feet from him. We stood there in the dark, the only sound being the idling engines of our two cars. "Get away from my car," I said, my voice trembling. He finally spoke, but it wasn't a sentence. It was a low, raspy chuckle. He took a step toward me, swinging the blackjack against his palm. I knew I couldn't fight him, and I couldn't get to my car. I did the only thing I could think of. I ran toward the back of the house. I jumped the side fence into the backyard, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. I hid behind a large shed, clutching my phone. I dialed 911 and whispered my location to the operator. While I was on the phone, I heard my car's engine rev, then the screech of tires. I peeked around the corner of the shed just in time to see my own car being driven away, followed closely by the beat-up sedan. The police arrived 10 minutes later. They found the house I was delivering to was actually a for-sale property that had been vacant for months. The order had been placed using a stolen credit card and a burner phone. They found my car 3 miles away, in a ditch. It had been completely gutted. The seats were slashed, the electronics were ripped out, and strangely, my delivery bag was sitting in the middle of the road, soaked in the melted milkshakes I dropped on the porch. The guy was never caught. The police told me it was likely a scout setup. They used delivery drivers to bring a vehicle to a quiet, dark spot, then steal it or whatever else they can get. I don't deliver at night anymore. I don't even like being in my car after the sun goes down. Framework prompt for future script generation. Act as a professional YouTube scriptwriter specializing in true horror stories. Mr. Nightmare. Let's read style. Write a detailed first-person narrative script, approx. 1,000 to 1,500 words. Focusing on insert topic. Setting. Insert setting. For example, rural America, isolated highway, suburban nighttime. Tone. Suspenseful, grounded, and direct. Use natural American English. No supernatural elements. Focus on human threats. Structure for each story. 1. The hook. Establish a normal routine or setting. 2. The incident. Introduce the first subtle red flag. 3. The escalation. Increase the tension through a direct confrontation or realization of danger. 4. The climax. The moment of highest peril or escape. 5. The aftermath. Police involvement, unsolved mysteries, or a lingering sense of dread. Rules. Start the script immediately with the first story. No intro, outro, fluff, or calls to action. Use sensory details, sounds, smells, visual cues to build immersion. Ensure the protagonist's internal monologue reflects realistic fear. The last story I have for you happened to a girl named Chloe, who was working for a grocery delivery service in a rural part of Washington state. It was late autumn, and the sun was setting around 4:30 p.m. I had one last delivery to a house deep in the woods, off a long, unpaved Forest Service road. The order was huge, nearly $300 worth of groceries, including a lot of raw meat and heavy canned goods. As I drove deeper into the trees, the cell service dropped to a single bar, then disappeared entirely. The road was narrow, lined with towering pines that blocked out the last of the twilight. When I finally reached the address, it was a small, dilapidated trailer sitting in a clearing. There were no lights on inside, and the yard was cluttered with rusted machinery and old tires. I pulled up and checked my notes. Leave on porch. Do not knock. I started unloading the bags. It took 3 trips. On the second trip, I noticed a movement in the woods, near the edge of the clearing. I stopped, squinting into the shadows. I saw a figure standing behind a tree, about 30 feet away. They were wearing a dark hoodie and just watching. I felt a surge of cold fear. I hurried back to my car, grabbed the last of the bags, and practically ran to the porch. As I set the last bag down, the front door of the trailer creaked open just an inch. A pale, thin hand reached out and grabbed one of the bags of meat, pulling it inside. No face, no greeting, just that hand. I didn't wait around. I got into my car and started the engine. But when I tried to put it in reverse, I saw the figure from the woods. He was no longer by the tree. He was standing directly behind my car, blocking the only exit out of the clearing. He was holding a long, rusted metal pipe. I honked the horn, hoping to scare him, but he didn't move. He just stared through the rear window, his face obscured by the hood. Then, from the trailer, I heard a loud, metallic Times clack. I looked over and saw a second man stepping off the porch, holding a bolt-action rifle. I didn't think. I shifted into drive and floored it, steering away from the man with the pipe and toward the open part of the yard. I bounced over a pile of scrap metal, my tires spinning in the mud. I heard a loud Times, bang Times, a gunshot, and my rear window shattered. I didn't stop. I drove through the brush, branches scraping the sides of my car, until I found the track of the road again. I pushed that car harder than I ever had, the engine screaming as I flew down the dirt path. I didn't see them follow me, but I didn't slow down until I hit the main highway. When I finally got to a police station, they took my statement, but they told me that the area was a known dead zone where several people had gone missing over the years. They went out to the trailer the next morning, but it was completely empty. No groceries, no furniture, no people, just a shell of a trailer and a few spent shell casings in the dirt. To this day, I wonder who ordered those groceries, and I wonder what would have happened if I'd stayed long enough for them to finish that bag of meat.